There is a lot of planning that you do in advance for a unit. So for myself, I always have a pretty clear idea of what the concepts are that I want to cover in the unit. But I use the children's motivation, their enthusiasm for different topics to help me determine how long I'm going to spend on different subtopics. But what you can't do is plan out a week in advance. You might have a sense of what you might do each day for inquiry during that week, but you'll never know exactly whether the lesson you planned on Wednesday is going to be the right lesson until the lesson on Monday happens. So once you see how the children respond to what you've offered, that is going to impact what you plan for the next lesson. I think we're always making choices about what we have time for in class and what we don't have time for. Sometimes there are things that feel like they're really, really important and you worry about getting to them. But there are a couple of things I find. One is that sometimes you realize that it's okay, that children have years and years of learning ahead of them, and that though gaining knowledge definitely is important, that one of the most important things that we're trying to do is to teach the children how to be learners, how to find information that relates to something they're interested in learning about, how to conduct research. And so the information itself, in terms of just facts, is not the be-all, end-all of what they're studying. It is definitely important, but there's so much to learn in the world, and there's lots of time for that. There's some pretty basic questions that you can use with children that really help them open up without feeling intimidated by your questions. So oftentimes I'll say to a child, can you tell me more about that? And sometimes that's all that's needed for a child to just add much more detail and much more to what it is they're sharing with you. Or you might focus in on something specifically that they said and say, well, you said such and such. Could you explain that a little bit more to me? Or it might even involve the child coming up and drawing something on the board or acting something out. Another option is to open it to the rest of the class and say, has anybody else had a similar experience to this? Or is there anyone else who has a different idea or can build onto this? And so it's not necessarily that one child's job to take everybody deeper, but actually together as a class, helping each other, building our knowledge together, we're able to understand something much more deeply than we could by just listening to one individual. I think if I feel that a concept is important enough that it's critical to understanding other parts of what we're studying, or they're just basic concepts that are valuable ones for the children to understand, then I can do one of a number of different things. I can ask them questions, I can tell them stories and see if that precipitates them connecting to those concepts. I can leave it and come back to it another time. There's all kinds of ways that you can scaffold them reaching an understanding or connecting with a topic that you're hoping they're going to without just delivering that in a didactic way. Children have all kinds of misconceptions about things in the world. I'm sure I probably still have some misconceptions about things as well. And so it's really a decision at that point in time when you hear it about how important it is to address that misconception. Sometimes it's simply a matter of just correcting it right there and then and saying, oh, I heard this, and I can really understand why it would seem that way, but let me share some information with you. So it could be simply the teacher clarifying that concept for the class. Or you might decide, oh, this is really interesting. This seems to be a misconception that several children in the class have. Let's see if we can scaffold and create some experiences for them that will allow them to discover that misconception through that process, as opposed to just being told what is correct. Because I think we've learned a lot of the time that even if we do correct children's misconceptions, often they seem to have understood the correct information, but in fact, in reality, they often go on to revert to their earlier misconceptions. So if they're able to arrive at that conclusion through more hands-on experiences, as opposed to just being told that information, it's likely going to resonate more deeply with them. They're more likely to retain the information and to be able to transfer it in a new context.